got to make it very plain and easy. Here we have Samaya.
یادم آمد هان داشتم میگفتم آن شب نیز صورت سرمای دی بیدادها میکرد و چه سرمایی چه سرمایی لیک آخر سرپناهی یافتم جایی گرچه بیرون تیره بود و سرد همچون ترس قهوه خانه گرم و روشن بود همچون شرم همگنان را خون گرمی بود قهوه خانه گرم و روشن مرد نقال آتشین پیغام راستی کانون گرمی بود مرد نقال آن صدایش گرم نایش گرم آن سکوتش گیرا و دمش چونان حدیث آشنایش گرم راه میرفت و سخن میگفت چوب دستی منتشع مانند در دستش مست شور و گرم گفتن بود صحنه میدانک خود را تند و گاه آرام میپیمود همگنان خاموش گرد برگردش به کردار صدف برگرد مروارید پای تا سر گوش هفت خان را زاد سرو مرو یا به قولی ماه سالار آن گرامی مرد آن هریوه خوب و پاکایین روایت کرد خان هشتم را من روایت می کنم اکنون Ladies and gentlemen, dames en heren, خانم ها و آقایان Welcome to my event, Verbinding, tackling social and work divisions through a synergistic model. My name is Somaya Dehban. I'm a passionate Dutchified Iranian, a community guardian, and a believer that sharing is power, because search ends when sharing starts. And I didn't make that last part up. It's just the meaning of my name and my family name. During the next hour or so, I will introduce you to the Nexus synergistic model that I have developed over the last couple of years based on my PhD research, as well as my engagement with political institutions and cultural centers and my work experience in academia and development aid. In a search for the notion of one with everything, finding that one identity that would encompass everything that I do, everything that I love, everything that I am. And I started this journey at a conscious but also subconscious level. And for this journey, I spoke with many people from different walks of life, and some of whom are present in this room or are watching us online. I spoke with political activists. I spoke with distant family members of mine. I spoke with widows of wars and victims of rape, professors of academia and practice, musicians, poets, construction workers, to governmental officials and religion converts, anyone whose path crossed with mine at some point. I also obsessively read books under the category of self-help and development, from Start with the Why by Simon Sinek or True North by Bill George. I also went back to the classics, like the Worth of a Nation by Adam Smith or The Prince by Machiavelli. I read over 350 books on this subject. And I also read a lot of academic papers, a lot of constitutions, a lot of policy papers, and that added up to about 150. And the result of reading all these books, all these papers, is this model that I want to present you today, It's that next level that brought me to the notion of Verbinding. Before I continue, I want to make a disclaimer. I'm a VVD member, and I came across the term Verbinding by someone who was sitting next to me at a lunch celebration of a D66 member. And the person sitting next to me, he was an environmentalist. He was an expert in garbage recycling. And he was a member of Forum for Democracy. He said, in the Dutch context, we have lost touch with each other because we do not simply talk and we do not have the notion of Verbinding anymore. The moment somebody hears I'm from Forum for Democracy, they don't want to talk to me. And that really stuck with me. And I thought, I have to call this model Verbinding in the Dutch context at least, because that's what it wants to bring about. And I'm sure that many of us sitting in this room have experienced this illusion that we are in a current state of absolute division from each other, at work, in our politics, in our community, or even in our personal life. In our present-day society that is driven by deep fear of differences, feelings of disconnection, silo working, or creating these safe bubbles, or even cancel culture. Regardless of the context, if we are looking to tackle the divide and bridge the gap between different parts, groups, and points of view, we know that it's not an easy task to do. And the truth is we are going downhill. We are more increasingly divided. And this being apart for 1.5 years due to COVID has accelerated this process for many of us. I believe finding a new model to live together and work together in peace and harmony is the responsibility of everyone alive now. Not for our future generation, but for right now. And how do we reverse this division that has been created? There is a lot of talk about ecocide, how the climate is changing and how we are killing our own planet. That's absolutely a very important issue. But for me, the fact that our communities are dying and are being eradicated, that's the concern I have, and I want to reverse that. I believe, and that belief is supported by many academic research that has been done, that if we lean into our need for bonding and connection, while also celebrating our differences, could and would guide us to prevent this disaster from worsening. And I believe we can start reversing the current divisions that define our societies, organizations, communities, and strive for peace, unity, and cooperation at all times. As a researcher, as an ambitious politician, as a consultant, as an activist, as a citizen, as a mother, finding a way to prevent our community eradication disaster led to developing a dream, or call it a vision, if you will. And that is in this question for me. What do we need to do to build a world with a personal freedom of choice, equality of opportunity, and the ability to thrive? And that is balanced with the responsibility to contribute to the collective good. Beside my academic and work experience that I mentioned for you at the beginning, the experience of being born and brought up in a society filled with constant paradoxical encounters, from sexual abuse to threats of execution for being bisexual to racial and religious discrimination, has given me an insight into understanding the root causes of divides. Also, rebuilding my life here in the Netherlands in exile and developing a thriving community, for a while also being a single mother, has been an icing on the cake. The cake being the synergistic model, of course. And my model has, that I will present it to you today, has 3 steps. It's a nexus approach that helps us connect seemingly unrelated allies and ideas and create a coalition from these groups. It's a model that stands on balance, harmony, tolerance of ambivalence, and it can be applied in academia, in politics, in business, and in community settings and our personal lives. Sounds too good to be true, right? On the contrary, it is anchored in the most simple truth about what makes us human, and that's our uniqueness. And with that uniqueness and the resulting differences of our uniqueness, we've got the chance to build a whole that is bound to be greater than its smaller pieces. Now, before we start to get into the details of this model, I want you to know that I want it to be a conversation, an engagement between all of us, not just a one-way talk, because there is no synergy in that. So at different times, there are moments that we are going to talk with each other in small groups and then in a bigger group. And for the ones who are watching online, take that moment to reflect for yourself and write down your own thoughts on the subjects. Or if there is somebody with you in the house, do it together. There will be about 5 minutes each round that you can talk to the person next to you or behind you if there is nobody sitting next to you, and then discuss the questions that I will propose. And from there, we can come back together and share the ideas that have been shared with each other in the small groups. With this in mind, we can move to the first part. To get more deeper into this idea of the vision, based on a survey done by BBC in 2019, 3/4 around the world say that their community is divided. And separated by our differences, unable to voice our opinions without feeling judged or left out, we create bubbles. And that reinforces our own beliefs. Add to that, as I said, that 1.5 years of COVID really puts us apart, and now we are only mingling with very, very, very like-minded people, and that prevents us from getting to know the other side of the story. Recently, the Dutch counterterrorism agency also warns us about the far-right acceleration in this country. At the same report, they also warns us about the left-wing acceleration. And they are coming together. It's not that one is better than the other or worse than the other. Both extremism sides are alarming because of the report. For the ones who are on Netflix and following the American news, a lot of you may have heard about the show of Dave Chappelle, The Closer, and how that story has become into a situation that he cannot leave his house because of the security reasons, the security threats that he has received. And in our own Dutch context, it has been a record that a government has not been formed, a coalition has not been formed after the elections. 225 was the time when I was writing was the number of days when I was writing this. And now I think it's about 230 or so. Despite the division, the majority of the people who participated in the same survey of BBC, they said they believe that there is more in the relations that they feel, and they can connect beyond the differences. And as social creatures, we are hardwired to care, to love, to form relationships. And we have a deep need for bonding and belonging. And as I warned you before, there is going to be a short discussion right away. And I want you to turn to the person next to you. If you are couples, I see already a couple of couples here, please pick somebody who is not related to you and ask their name. Ask what is their favorite color, and ask how they want to take their coffee if they are coffee drinkers, and if not, how do they take their tea or any other hot beverage. And put that together for yourself in a very plain sentence. Tell the other person what that makes you think of that person sitting next to you based on these 3 simple questions: the name, the color, the coffee, or the tea. We have 5 minutes for this, and then we will get back together. And of course, be ready to also share that with the rest of the group. Thank you. To know the name of a person, their favorite color, and the type of their coffee or tea. It's a bit strange, isn't it, that we just, with these 3 questions, are supposed to make up a story and a judgment, basically a judgment about the other person. Isn't it difficult? It's impossible to know the other person by 3 things. I heard Mark over there saying that if somebody takes their coffee very black without milk and sugar, I take the assumption, if I may add that word to it, that they work very hard. I drink that type of coffee when I want to go to bed. It works for me. So our assumptions, our judgments are fueled every single day, and based on it, we make choices to interact with someone or not. And a lot of the times, this is absolutely subconscious. We don't know it. Anyone who wants to share something at this moment about what they heard? Yes, Rohan.
I think what was really interesting with Anne and Anne was that I think we didn't care too much about talking about the drink element, because we were both very interested in colors in itself. And I think it was just interesting that we immediately made a lot of connections when we heard colors. So I said maroon, and Anne said that that's unusual. I don't hear that a lot. And of course made some assumptions about it. And then when we really try to understand why you like the color, if I may share, I understood that one was because at some point that color was not liked by fellow school children, so it felt like a rebellious thing to like it. I sort of made the connection that maroon, for me, reminds me of Namibia and my home, so it has a comfort feeling. And I think with you, pink was just your happy color. And I think it was a really interesting way to learn from each other in that sense.
Yeah, yeah. Isn't it fabulous that you went beyond the question, basically, the simple color. Yeah. Then you went why, and you asked more why, and then again more why. And that, at the end, brought you actually together. Maroon for you is standing out, and for you is the country, so you bond together over that. And that's basically the point. We need to just know more about each other before we start making any judgments, any decisions, any choices. Anybody else who wants to share? Yes, sir.
We have all the favorites the same, they're not the same.
May I ask you to speak just a bit louder, because I cannot hear you, sorry.
Okay. Mine getting together resulted in that we all like the same. The favorites are all the same. The way of coffee drinking and the color, just the name is slightly different. But I like the name of the person that I met. So the consequence was that if we felt a little bit more connected, then probably we would have felt connected when the way of coffee drinking was different and the colors were different, and the name would be a name that they didn't like.
Yeah, yeah.
That was what we discussed.
And may I ask a follow-up question? How did that make you feel?
That I like him.
He is very likable, Ruben, I know. But it's a great feeling to be able to like somebody else just because you have similar coffee drinking habits, right? Karen, I saw you raise your hand for a bit. So the difference, the absolute difference, if we say cappuccino and hard coffee are the two sides of the spectrum, the difference actually brought you closer to each other.
Yeah, that's Maybe I can add something to it.
Yes, please.
The differences were big. But to be quite honest, I was not interested in the way she drinks coffee. I was not interested in what was her color. When she said her color, I thought, she likes space. But that's, I know it's my opinion, not her. But the three questions were a very good stepping stone to talk about things I was interested in, and I think she was interested in it too. So we got more than just the three questions.
Just
that
going
nice.
the mile further, basically.
Yeah, I think curiosity is a great drive.
Yeah. Wanting to know more.
That's interesting because these questions were very, in a way, neutral, and they're not usually questions that I would have an assumption about someone. So I'd really think, what do I think? But the minute you talk about what political party you are, then I think that's when you get overloaded with judgments or,
Yeah, but if you also take a political color as a color, then it could mean so many things, and you could find so many similarities and differences just by talking about it.
So it's very interesting to see that you could indeed find an assumption about something that seems so neutral,
Saskia.
Technical is very neutral, but I think also the way a person talks to you, the tone and the way of expression, that gives it more depth.
Absolutely.
Because then how she explained, like, I love this color, I'm in love with it, gives me really another feeling. I want to know more why. No?
Yeah, absolutely. And this.
You want to know, huh? Exactly that. I had the same. The raspberry red.
So it's very, very simple questions, but they can evoke a lot of deep emotions and curiosity, as you mentioned. I'm very happy that we are already quite ahead in our expressions, because the next part that I'm going to talk about is what is this model that I keep talking about it. Of course, we are in the Netherlands. We are famous for our polar model. And I would like to say we are over with it. We need to move to a synergy-based community and a synergy-based model. Let me say why. In cooperation with other people, it could be our partners, it could be our community, it could be our workspace, it could be our political party and our society in general. There are two lines, the cooperation and the trust. And if we are thinking about that my way is the right way, we are on the defensive line. We think my win is equal to your loss, and I want to always be the winner. And that's many, many, many places, this is how it's been working. We, the Dutch, have been actually quite advanced comparing to the other countries, because we are a country of compromise. We continuously polder, and we keep talking, we keep hammering, we try to go back to the very, very, very basic of what makes us the same. We are only looking for becoming the same. And it worked for us. In comparison to many other countries, it brought us a lot further. We tried to be that win-win country. Let's say it worked for a while, but recently we see that it hasn't been working. Again, the example of our government not being formed on the fact that we just cannot find enough basic similarities to form a government on is one side, but also the fact that we constantly compromise, it means that we are changing subconsciously and sometimes consciously our basic principles, our core values, because we just want to meet you exactly right here. And that is not helpful, because that means we have to change constantly ourselves, and then our values become something that after a while we just don't recognize ourselves in it. That's why I believe we have to go to a synergistic model, because in a synergy-based model, we are not talking about compromises. We are talking about exactly what makes us different from each other, and not just say, oh, I respect you for being different from me. No, we value each other from being different from each other, and build on each other's strength and support each other to improve our weaknesses. Another challenge that we have with the compromise model is how it is manifested in our racial conversations. We say, I'm colorblind. I don't see colors. And I think that is BS. That is what makes us so fragile when it comes to talking about race. Because if you just say, I don't see color, it means that you don't see anything about my history, about where I came from, about what I suffered from. And then you say, oh, you're just like me. No, in no way I am like you, because we have a different race. We have a different ethnic background, and we went through different experiences. And they are good that they are different from each other, because it makes us unique. It gives us that element for knowing what works in a specific context and what doesn't work in a different context. So seeing our differences and respecting them and valuing them is what we need in a synergistic model. It's the same with our relationships. When we meet someone, for some of us might be very long time ago, for some of us might be just very recent or in process, we always look for the difference, the similarities we have with each other. We take the same type of coffee, we like the same colors, we want to go on the same trips. It's very peachy and pinky, and we love it, and we want to have more of the same thing. That's great, it starts a conversation. But the way we deal with our differences is what guarantees whether or not we are going to stick with each other or not. Because like it or not, after a while we realize, oh, you sleep that way? I actually hate it. Oh, you eat your food this way with lots of salt and bread? Oh, I hate bread. I just want rice. How do we go about these differences? If we go on the line of compromise, it means that I have to give up my rice for your bread most of the time or some of the time, and that doesn't make us sticking to our own values and our own likings. And because of that, we start growing apart from each other. So how we deal with our differences is what guarantees us to stick with each other. And that's, for me, the whole notion of verbinding, that bonding element. And the same with the term gezellig, that in Dutch we have it, but in English the term cozy doesn't really do justice in the translation. I try to really use the term interconnectedness, but there is a much deeper emotional element to the term verbinding that we need to take into account when we are talking about our differences and valuing that. Our differences, and taking it in a synergistic way, is a catalyst for moving the conversation forward and to get us to the next level, because that's we as the Dutch, we as the society need to get to the next level, basically. And that brings me to the beginning of telling you about my model, how I have designed it and how I have developed it. My model has three elements, three phases. It's very straightforward, just three. And the first one starts by understanding. And what I mean by understanding is to know where we are coming from. What is my background? What did my parents go through? What did my race go through? And then look at where I'm standing now. What brought me here? Was it because my family, my society made sacrifices that makes it possible for me to stand here? Was it because my race was the superior to the others in the context that we are living in, so I was given a lot of chances, a lot of opportunities without really doing anything about it? Was it because anything that I had anything to do with? And when we know where we are standing and where we are coming from, then is the moment we can start talking about where we are heading. If we don't discuss what happened during the World War II to our Jewish community, but also to our LGBT community, to our disabled community, we cannot talk about going to the next phase of, oh, let's provide equality for everyone. No, that doesn't work that way. So understanding is the starting point of my model. And this understanding is in 3 phases. Systematic review. For the academics in the room, this is a very familiar term. It's basically reading, discussing, analyzing what happened in the past. What has happened before us? Who has done what and what result it brought? And this way, it helps us to know the background, know the history, why there is so little understanding of what was before us. I remember sitting in one of my bachelor classes that one of the students stood up and said, I should not be responsible for what happened to the Native Americans. Okay, but there is a but behind it. And that not understanding the story of how things have happened is a challenge, because if we don't know that the Columbus Day is actually an announcement of invasion of a nation, and we keep celebrating it, that's a problem, because we don't know what has happened before that time. So a systematic review helps us to understand where we are coming from, to give us a perception, and knowing that when we talk about our gut feelings are actually quite influenced by our past, by the way we've been raised, by the information we've been fed. And when we know this past, then we can answer a lot of why questions that come after it. Why do you like this color? Basically, because in your past, there was this story behind it. And these are the basics of starting a conversation if we want to know exactly where we want to go. The next element is creating a guiding coalition. What I mean by guiding coalition is getting together people who know what has happened, who have the experience of how to deal with it, and can also help us move forward from that. Sometimes we only stick with the white, old men. And then we can go also to completely the other side. We say we only work with the youth who do not have the experience, who have not worked in the field, who do not have the sufficient knowledge. What works is that we bring this side of the story to the other side of the story and work together. And there is a lot of discussion about diversity and inclusion. I should tick a lot of boxes for any company when I'm hired for them, because I'm a woman, I'm an ethnic minority, I'm an ethnic sexual minority, I'm from this background. It ticks a lot of boxes. But if I go to a company that exactly the same things are being said, what is my added value? The point of this whole inclusion and diversity is to talk to people who are not like-minded. But unfortunately, in our job descriptions, it's always said, we are looking for a like-minded person. Well, I'm not that person. And that's the challenge we need to get over. And when we are building this guiding coalition, it is about our powers, it's about our knowledge, it's about our relations. And when we put a coalition that has different elements and can support each other, that's where we are moving towards a winning situation. And the last one of this phase is ideation. It's a combination of idea and action. And that's where we put on paper what we want to do, where we want to go, and put a very realistic strategy attached to it. As a consultant working for different organizations, I've seen that a lot of missions and visions and strategies are developed, and they are nicely printed in the brochures and then put into display. And then years by, nobody has implemented it, because it looks nice, but it's not implementable, because it's too abstract maybe, or maybe it's just a recommendation that doesn't match the capacity of the organization. And then it's done by people in a fancy office that has no relation with the people who are supposed to implement it. And that's why it's very important that that idea of where we want to go is translated into something that is actually actionable. That's why I called it ideaction. And that's developing realistic and pragmatic strategies. The next phase of my model is called implementing. And in the hierarchy of purpose in consultancy work is that you get a problem, you get an assignment from the organization, you try to come up with a recommendation to solve it, and then you put a strategy of how to do it. And that's usually how the work ends, and that's the understanding phase. But never it goes, or seldom it goes to the phase of helping the organization to actually implement it. They come in, they develop something, and they leave. And then how you go about it is not clear. And that's why, for me, implementing is the next step of this phase. And the first element in the phase of implementing is stakeholder management, and it's stakeholder engagement. What I mean by it is that we need to constantly go back to our community. We need to constantly go back and see who else is involved with this project. If we are running a library for going around the city and handing out books, who came up with this idea? Who is involved with this? How is it working for the parents that are not at home when the library coming in? And how can we help to make sure that the driver, the one who has the books, and the one who wants to take the books are actually aligned with each other? And that's where engaging the stakeholders is quite important to know what to do about the projects that we are moving forward with. The second phase of this implementation is forces aligned. What it means is that sometimes, a lot of the times, I've seen that projects are running in one community by one organization, and then another organization comes and starts running the same project, and then another comes and starts not the same project, but the same target group working on it. And this is basically working in parallel with each other instead of working together and aligning our forces together. And this creates a sense of that we are achieving something, but we are pedaling, but we are not moving forward. And this creates a lot of challenges for the community, where we are presenting these offerings basically for them. And the last part is deserved recognition. A lot of the work that is done goes unrecognized. A lot of the positive work that is done goes unrecognized. And what happens is that instead of following the people and the ideas that are relevant, are useful for our society, we end up following people who have influence through social media. If we take, for instance, the Hollywood, basically, they play in one movie in a year, and then they are awarded and recognized for it in Oscars, and then they are awarded and recognized for it in Golden Globes, and then they go and are recognized for it in Emmys and, I don't know, Tonys, and this award and that award. It's just for one thing. And you wonder why they like doing the work they are doing so much, because they keep being recognized and awarded for it. But what happens, let's say, in academia? So many academics are publishing on regular basis, quite breakthrough research. Do we know anything about it? Do we hear anything about it? No, because we think it's not cool enough or it's not relevant for us. But it's something that needs to be recognized over and over. And that's why one of the points that I always advocate is that we have to make academics our new celebrities, our new royals that we follow and listen to and follow through with what they say. We don't need 𝐓𝐚𝐜𝐤𝐥𝐢𝐧𝐠 to come and tell us from the heart of the mother what we should do about COVID. We need academics to tell us what we should do about COVID. We don't need moon sisters to tell us what we should follow for our cycles or whatever they follow. We should listen to academics to tell us how to improve our health and well-being. I feel I need to take a little break, have a bit of a water, and before moving to the next phase, I want to ask for another verbinding together. I know I said a lot of things that it sounded a bit academic, but I want to open the floor to go back to the person that you talked to in the previous round and ask them what was the first moment that they realized that their existence, where they are standing, was not what they thought it was. That when was the moment you realized that the history you've been told, the stories that you were told, were not actually the actual truth or the actual stories about your race, about your family, about your religion, about your background? What was the moment that made you question, basically, what is the truth? Shall we go for 5 minutes about this? May I invite you back to the group again? I know. I realize it's a very touching subject, and I'm very honored that you are so open and discussing it with each other and wanting even to go on more. Well, after this, there is more time for having a conversation with during the borrel, as the Dutch would say. So I know it's a very touching subject. Maybe I can start my own story first, and then if somebody wants to join, I would love to hear your story as well. I grew up in the city of 𝐓𝐚𝐜𝐤𝐥𝐢𝐧𝐠. It's part of the province of Tehran, and the city of Tehran is the capital, like Utrecht, city of Utrecht, and so on. And we were the only members of our family in that part. The rest were scattered in different parts of the city of Tehran or in other parts of the country. For many, many, many years, whenever we went to visit our relatives, for me it was we are going to visit the others, because they didn't speak like us. Even my cousin has exactly the same name and family name as me, but for me it was like, oh, them, not us, because we don't have the accent that they have, because we were raised in parts of the country that is considered as the high accent of the society, and anyone else was pushed down. And for many years, for me, it was, this is it. This is how it is. I never even questioned it. And years later, many, many years later, I realized that my father actually had exactly the same accent. But he had eradicated, literally eradicated all his history and his accent, because he knew if he wants to rise up the ranks, he has to speak the same as the people who are going up the ranks or in the high ranks already. And for him, he never, of course, talked about it. I believe it was one of the most challenging situations, because he has to be away from a community that raised him, that developed him, and say no to it, completely deny it, and then become somebody that was actually not him, but that was his way of fitting into the new context. And that created a lot of trauma in him, and as a result, in his family. Whenever we wanted to go on a trip towards there was always a briefing session. You don't talk to this person, you don't ask these questions, you don't do this, you don't do that. Why? Because that was the norm there. And he didn't want us to be part of that norm. And he wanted us to forge a new identity for ourselves, the way he did it for himself. And when I realized that part of the story, and I did a DNA test, and I realized, hey, I actually have zero, like literally zero connection to the city of Tehran and the province of Tehran, and a very wide range around that domain, zero connection. And 98% of my blood is coming from the region that he tried so hard to say that he has no connection with. And that was a very shocking moment for me. It was shocking to see how my history is very not true, the way it was told to me, but also it helped me to understand my father, that why he did it, and what was his reasoning for it, and how hard it was for him. And it also brought me closer to my relatives, that I always counted them as the other, and now I feel I'm one of them. And that is the moment, I think, the understanding of our past will bring us and makes us feel about ourselves and about our lives. Now, who else wants to share their story on realizing a moment that something was not actually the truth? Yes?
Yeah, maybe not a whole story, but the thing I have to think about is that when I became 16, 17, 18, I decided to go to Suriname, to live there, because I was fascinated by this idea of what happens if I'm not in this superior position, being white, being born in a well-off family, etc., etc. So I was questioning, I think maybe unconscious partly because of my age, but I was questioning my background and our position as white, in this Western white world.
Yeah.
So I traveled to the opposite, and I had a great time.
Fantastic. There is this, it's a whole other story on its own, that the Samvers and Novers. Samvers are the ones who go and travel and see other cultures, see other places, see other people. And Novers are the ones who stay. There is nothing wrong with either of the situations, but there is a difference between the two. And I think you are one of the Samvers, that you traveled from where you were, and there could be someone with the same situation as yours and didn't move. So that's, I think, a very interesting way of looking at it. Anyone else who wants to share? Yes, Rohan.
So I think I just wanted to say that I really resonated with what you said earlier about the importance of not being colorblind, because it's really important to understand where people sort of came from. And I'm from Namibia originally, as you know, so racism and those discussions were actually part of the conversations at the tables before you can remember. But in the transitional period, Nelson Mandela really was actually pushing for this colorblind element after apartheid. of saying we're all equal, we're all there, and growing up in Namibia and South Africa, I kind of brainwashed or felt myself to think, no, there's no issues, whilst feeling racism a lot, but just being like, no, that's not there.
Yeah.
And when I came to, it wasn't a specific moment, but when I came to the Netherlands to study, at my old university in Cape Town, there were all these protests happening about Cecil John Rhodes, who was a colonizer and did a lot of terrible things.
Yeah.
And there were protests at the university for that, but also for fees being too high for the native population to afford. And for some reason, me being so far away from my own country, it was just this overwhelming feeling of like, wow, this colorblind thing is not working, and South Africa and Namibia is not where it should be. Of course, we had these discussions with my dad, but it was just this intense moment of realizing how much work is necessary.
Absolutely. Yeah, yeah. Now, the last part, I call it scaling. And the reason that I added this element is that in most cases, at least from what I studied, is that you are given a solution, you implement it, and that's it. We don't go further. We don't do more. We don't repeat it. We don't go to the next level. And I believe we've done enough of the same thing. We need to go to the next level. That's why I believe in this synergistic model, it's very important to have a scaling phase. And the first part of scaling phase is called agile integration. It means very simply what we do and we did in the past and it worked, we keep just doing it as if that's the norm. Not because there is a project going on, but because this is the way of living, this is the way of doing things. The second phase of this is merging powers. And this is meant as if we know that there is a similar project going on and two organizations are doing the same thing, why not doing one together instead of two separate ones? That creates a lot of overhead and so on. Take it at a personal level. If you want to have a healthier life and your partner also wants to have a healthier life, why don't you do it together? And this way you are keeping each other accountable, you're moving forward together, and you're growing also at the same time together. The last part is that it becomes anchored in our way of being. It becomes more than just the norm, it becomes our second skin, basically. And for me, this was a very eye-opening when I read about all the change management, change leadership, and anything that comes with change. That change, we work on it, but the culture change comes at the very, very end. And that also made me realize that a lot of the times that I was an activist, from the very beginning, I wanted a change in culture. That doesn't happen. Change in culture comes at the very end, when we show results, when we prove it works, when we can scale it, and then it becomes part of the culture. Anything before that is just surface. We may sound that we have changed, but back deep inside, we are still the same. So it was very eye-opening for me to realize that the culture change comes at the very, very end. And now the question is, so we know all of this, what now? Well, for myself, this model has helped me to accelerate a process that was delayed for about 15 years in just about 3 years. And it was a very subconscious process to move from thinking all the time that I want to go back to academia and do PhD, and then apply this, and then I moved forward. And now I'm in my third year of PhD. In health, in being politically active, in digging into my own roots, all of this I just followed the model. I went for the understanding, I went for implementing, and I went for the scaling, and it worked. And my invitation for you all is to start with asking the question, where am I standing? And my standing at this position, where is it coming from? And where do I want to go from there? I started the presentation by telling you my name. I've been living in this country for 15, 16 years, and up to this moment, still people pronounce my name wrong, except my beloved partner and my 2 children, because I taught them to. And this was part of the journey for myself to also understand my own name better, and to also get into the details of what does it really do to me when I talk about my name and my family name. And that became my calling, basically. What do I go for? And being a community guardian is what makes me feel whole. Being a Dutchified Iranian is something that I'm extremely proud of, to choose your nationality. That's something that I can say what I am. Also being a nexus strategist, implementing what I just said today and in a strategic way, that also makes me very proud. Being a daughter, being a mother, and being a partner, that also makes me very proud, and that's also what I am. And connecting smiles, that's something a friend told me. He said, for me, you always connect the smiles in people. I don't know if I do that, but if he feels that is what's happening to him, I'm happy to be that as well. And as I said, I truly believe that sharing is power. Search ends when sharing begins. And that's what I want to be, and that's what I am. And as a takeaway, think about, what are you? What do you call yourself? I invite you to join me on my podcasts that I do once a week, and every week it's a different subject. I have a podcast and a newsletter attached to it called Scale Your Impact. It's very much based on my PhD research, which is about scaling impact. On another week, I talk about Iran, about Middle East, and how the changes in that region of the world impacts us on this side. I call it Your Native Analyst. There you will hear how the media, what they represent about Iran, is so far from the truth. Not in a positive way, I'm saying, oh, Iran is so great and flowers growing everywhere, the government is great. No, they are actually sugarcoating everything for us on this side of the world. And the Iranian regime is very much benefiting from that. So listen to that podcast and the newsletters that comes with it to hear actually what happens in Iran. I also have another podcast, Your Funding Network. And that's about bringing financial stability to community-based initiatives. I advocate for ending development aid as it is, because it's actually eradicating our communities instead of making them grow. And the last week of the month, you can listen to Your Curated King, which is my life in exile and how my past has influenced me and how the home recipes has actually kept me rooted, connected to my roots. I'm also, as you may have noticed already, active in politics. I'm happy to see some of my VVD friends here. That at the moment I'm running for a candidacy at steering committee and council delegate of ALDE, which is the Alliance of Liberal and Democrats of Europe. I'm on the list for gemeenteraad 2020 for Utrechtse Hooivorrug. And I have been talking to the scouting committee of my party to be on the list for European Parliament on 2024. So, what's on my ear? And I have also a bunch of books coming up, which I would like to share with you, and of course encourage you to go for the pre-sale. In the Q2 of next year, I will be publishing a book called My Wedding Day, the day I hanged my identity. This is about a marriage I had when I was in Iran, and you will hear how it changed my life and my identity. And by the term used, hanged, you can imagine how it has changed me. In the end of that year, next year in Q4, you can expect a book coming out called The Legends of My Mother's Community-Based Fundraising. And if you go to the city of Karaj, where I describe where we lived, and you ask about a sport hall, in the biggest sport hall actually in the city, they all know who built it. Yes, my mother, through community-based fundraising. And the year after, I'm going to talk to you about at home in exile, how being in Iran at home was actually an exile for me, and being here in exile has made home for me. And the last one is, of course, my PhD that will come out in 2023 in the last quarter, and it's about enhancing the impact of cross-sector partnership, because I truly believe the future is not female, is not male, is not anything but cross-sectoral. And I have a series of people to thank. I want to thank Laura Tofis, the marketing palette. She did wonders for my work, for my newsletters, for making this happen, basically. I want to thank Larian, Marike, Javid, Chris, and Damien, the Expo Media, the ones who are filming this event for me. I want to also thank Christina for taking all the pictures of today, and I also want to thank Hans for helping me prepare for this event. I want to thank Julius, who is not in the room at the moment, but helped me as the floor manager, and Daniel Keshani as someone who managed my website. If you would like to go, it's 𝐓𝐚𝐜𝐤𝐧𝐠.com, very simple. I want to thank Mirel, who is running the daycare for us on the other side, and Hannah Huber, and Tom Felton, who played the piano, and Vivian and Max from Academiegebouw. I also like to thank the partners. Elizabeth is here as the founder of She Credit, is a financial institute for giving loans to small to medium-sized enterprises run by women. I want to thank EPAR, Erasmus PhD Association Rotterdam, who also promoted this event among their network. I also want to thank Open Science Community Rotterdam, who is also promoted this event. And I also want to thank BRICS Foundation for sponsoring this event. Sharing is power. And my children who are sitting here, Robert and Jesso, they've been sharing their love, their passion, and their support in the last many, many years that we've been together. And they've always shown their love and respect for me, for each other, and for Remco. Jesso, thank you so much for every time that you pick the outfit that I wear. You are a fantastic, fashionable boy, and I love you dearly. And Robert, you were so worried about the fact that we will not have enough cake. We will, I promise you. And every night at the dinner table, you always start by, "How was your day, Mom?" And that makes my day. Thank you, sweetheart. Oh. And Remco, you have bewitched me, body and soul. And I love you. Thank you for everything that you've offered me and we will have together for the rest of our lives. Thank you. And that was it. I would like to invite you to go back to the reception room. There will be hapjes, snacks, vegetarian, vegan, and different types. Ask for specific types if you're looking for, and we'll see each other there. Thank you.